All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Tavares. I'm the president of the Tompkins Chamber. I want to thank you for taking time to join us this morning for this very important topic about resiliency planning. I think if the last couple of years have not taught us anything, it's that we need to ensure that we are ready to recover from emergencies and disasters, and that we have a plan in place to support our workforce, our business continuity, and recovery from business disruptions. And so I was really grateful when Scott Doyle, associate planner from Tompkins County, approached me about this topic and making it available more broadly to the business community, to the chamber membership, and to the community at large. And we're excited to be able to partner with Tompkins County to offer this topic. It is part of our L.E.A.R.N series, webinar series sponsored by Tompkins Trust Company. But we also, in conjunction with Tompkins County, wanted to be sure that this was free and accessible to all participants who wanted to join us today. And also this is being recorded so that we can make it available after the fact, because this content is so important and we want to be able to share it. And I know the county does as well. So for anyone who is sensitive to that fact, you can feel free to keep your screen off, or just put questions in the chat, or whatever you're most comfortable with this morning. So I am going to turn it over to Scott Doyle, who is going to take things from here. And thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. This is a topic that's very important to me and the county. And I've really appreciated insights in talking with the chamber, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to work with you and your team on this. And I'm really happy for people to attend too from the greater business community. This is something that we provided a similar training in March for local governments. And that's really the group that I'm most comfortable and most frequently interacting with. And one of the things that we came to realize in talking about that is not only do we need to tailor this to the business community specifically, but we need to learn more from the business community about what would be helpful in terms of these resources. So we're really happy to have this opportunity, structure things quite a bit differently to kind of talk through things, but we really want to learn from you as well. So I'll tell you a little about why this came together and what this is about here in a couple intro slides. And I'm going to turn it over to Tony Subio from Tetra Tech, who's really provided some great guidance to us on this topic, and I hopefully will provide some good insights for you as well. So Tony, why don't we kick to the agenda page here? I'll just give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. Give you a short welcome, give you a little bit of history of this project and why we're doing this. And then we're going to get into the topic and pass it over to Tony, and he's going to talk a little bit about what continuity is, some of the key principles we want to think through, and then really get into some resources that I think are going to be helpful for you. One of the things that I learned in talking with Jennifer, but also a lot of my business colleagues around the region, was that it's really important to again make this an efficient way to digest the information, but also record this information for those that have more time sensitive issues need to cut out, but also can refer back to. So there's a lot of resources I think we'll point you to that hopefully will help. Maybe some of those will help light some ideas for getting you ready to recover more quickly post hazard event. So we actually have even a business continuity planning framework that can help. We'll share that post meeting to tell you a little bit more about what some ideas for things you might want to think about on that. But we also want to talk a lot and hear from you about things that you're concerned about, and also ways that we think things can be designed to help the business community more in recovering from events. So we'll kick to the next slide there, Tony. The impetus for this came from a grant we obtained from the Department of State, New York Department of State, to do a resiliency and recovery plan. The crux of that was our research had shown we're pretty good on the response and preparedness end of things for hazard events, but that longer term recovery is something that if communities plan for that in certain ways, the ability to bounce back and recover from and get back to business is much, much stronger if you have a couple key tenants in place. So one of the things, I'll just describe a little more of that grant program, what we're working on with that. And there's a key component of that, that's economic recovery that we're talking about with this focus on continuity. So the Department of State has been very helpful in funding this, helpful to bring in experts like Tetra Tech to talk more about that. So really appreciate that effort. Okay, Tony, next one. So this is just a graphic that gives you a sense of the types of things that we've been doing as a part of this resiliency plan. I wanted to mention it to all of you, just to let you know that there's several other things afoot here in advancing this resiliency plan. Everything from our hazard mitigation plan, which we'll reference, talking about drought and flood issues for critical facilities, how we deal with debris post events, but also thinking through some flood management techniques like the community rating system. But the red one is really the focus for us today, community economic recovery. So we want to talk about some of the input from you, from both the survey, but also from this discussion will help us guide kind of how we tailor that resource. The idea is across all these topic areas, we'll have the kind of high priority actions to help us together work in building resiliency and recovery in our community. So the link here is our Tompkins County Planning Department page. There's a climate adaptation page that can tell you more about this and keep you abreast of that. We're going to be wrapping that up this summer, so more to come on that. So go ahead, Tony. Next one is what is continuity? This is where I'm going to pass it over to Tony Subio from Tetra Tech. Again, Tony's been really helpful on a couple of key aspects with this plan. Continuity planning for one of them, giving us some guidance on that. He'll give you some insights here. But also he's been really helpful on a couple other fronts, including our debris management plan. So I really appreciate Tony's insights, and I'm hopeful that he can help us further our conversation together on this front. So Tony?
Great, thanks, Scott, and good morning, everybody. As Jen and Scott has said, my name is Tony Subio. I'm with Tetra Tech. I'm an emergency planner by background, but I've been focusing mostly on some mitigation and recovery work in the last few years. I've worked with everything from a major insurance company in Lower Manhattan to different county governments throughout New York State to help them develop their continuity plans. And so I'm really happy to be here today with you to talk about continuity and how you can help to make sure that your organization can continue during and after an event. So we'll get started with just an overview of what continuity is. We'll talk about the principles. We're going to keep this a very high level, but at the same time kind of simplified, because as you'll see towards the end of the presentation today, there is a lot of information and guidance from different stakeholders about continuity planning, whether it's for the government or for the business and non-governmental organization community. And it can be an incredibly technical field and an incredibly technical set of guidance for you to help develop your plans. So we want to give the theory and keep it simple so it's easier to understand. And then if you want to get into the guidance and the other resources that we'll talk about later on, you'll have that foundational knowledge of what each part of it is talking about. So in terms of what continuity is, it's the ability to provide uninterrupted critical services, essential functions, and support while maintaining the viability of the organization before, during, and after an event that disrupts normal operations. I told you it's a very technical field, and so here the definition here from FEMA kind of matches that. But really, you're just trying to make sure that you can keep doing what your organization needs to do, either during and immediately after and beyond that, following some kind of emergency or disaster event. And those things that can disrupt your normal operations can vary. It can be damage to your building that makes the building inaccessible or unavailable for a period of time. That lack of accessibility. It could be a lack of staff, either there's the doom and gloom side of it that, that maybe there was an accident or something happened to the building, or with the COVID pandemic or any other kind of public health event, where you can say, yeah, our staff might be, we might not have the staff to do everything we need to because something very, very bad happened. But it applies just as much to if the staff in the office played the Powerball together and won, and suddenly everybody turned in their notice the next day and said, we're out of here. Now you suddenly have a severe lack of staff to be able to do those critical things, those essential things that your organization does. And the next one is a loss of the data or the electronic systems that you need to do your work. So everything from the financial sector to your typical IT network. Like what happens if you're the victim of a ransomware attack, or your server just decides it doesn't want to work anymore, or a mouse chews through some critical component. Now you don't have the ability to get to your data or the systems that you need, whether they're in your office or on your computer or on the web or in the cloud. So continuity really focuses on how do we continue to do what we need to do when any of these things or a combination of these things happens to us. To get into some of the principles of continuity and continuity planning, we're looking to answer the following questions during a disruption. First, what critical actions do we need to take? What are our critical functions? What are our essential functions that this organization absolutely has to perform no matter what? And no matter what's happened, no matter how many people are available, this is what we need to do for this organization to continue to be an organization, or this business to continue to operate. And then you need to find out, who's going to do them. And that could be the staff that's normally available. It could be successors that you identify, people that can take over a role or a function if something happens to the person or people that normally perform those. How is it going to be done? What equipment, what resources, what supplies do you need? This could be everything from your typical office computer to if you're a service organization that operates a food pantry or mobile feeding operations. Your trucks, your food trucks are critical equipment and resources that you have. So how can we continue to provide service and what stuff, what equipment, resources are going to be required to do those? Where are we going to perform these critical actions? It could be everywhere from your normal office space to if you have garages of equipment to if you're out in the public providing service. Where are these going to happen? Can we telework? Can we have people working from home? And what resources and IT infrastructure would we need to be able to support that? And then when, or more particularly, how quickly do we need to resume these critical actions? Can we be down for a week? Can we be down for 2 weeks? Can we only be down for a day or a few hours before something really bad starts happening and we're seeing these significant impacts to our operations and to what we do? And then you need to think about who's in charge and what happens if that person or those people are not available. How is the organization going to return to normal? Be it everyone our building gets fixed and everyone comes back to the office, or is it a new normal? We saw from the pandemic that we're hopefully on the tail end of now, that the working from home, teleworking, telecommuting, our kids going to school online, remotely, maybe that's going to be the new normal. So we need to look at, from the time that you start to figure out what you're going to do to be able to continue to operate during an emergency or immediately after an emergency or an event. You should be also thinking about how do we get back to normal, whether it's our old normal or a new normal as well. And so we have some questions here to help kind of guide you through thinking through that information and answers to those questions. And it starts with, what does your business or your organization do? And if you can succinctly elaborate on what the point of your organization is, then you've started to identify what those essential functions are. And maybe your purpose, there's no judgment in what your purpose is. If it's a business and your organization is there to make money, that's fine. If it's providing social services, if you're providing healthcare, if you're manufacturing something, look at what is your organization's purpose. And then from that purpose, what major functions do you need to carry out for you to continue to meet that purpose? What are those major functions? It could be everything from, you're looking at your mission statement or your vision statement to see, what we think our organization does. We provide feeding services to the population of the city of Ithaca or throughout Tompkins County. And so, right there, you can see that part of those major functions is providing feeding services. You'll want to see if it's a company that supports the government in paving or landscaping or any type of service that you provide. What is the crux of what your organization does? And then look at what are those key things we need to do. We know we need to actually perform that service. If we're a bank, then we know that we need to be able to provide access to our customers, our clients, to their financial resources. We need to meet certain reporting requirements. That absolutely has to happen. We have to work with the regulators to meet these deliverables. All of those things are the major functions that you do. So there's going to be some operational functions and there's going to be some administrative functions. For instance, we need to continue to perform human resources and personnel functions. We need to make sure that our people get paid. If we can't make sure that our people get paid, they're going to stop working here. And if we lose all our staff, now we have a continuity event because we don't have the staff to perform the functions of what our organization does. So you need to think that through of what is the full set of those functions that help you meet your purpose.
This is something I'm really interested in hearing more from participants about too, is knowing that there are a broad range of different types of businesses, from a brick and mortar retail to someone providing a set, someone that does not have an office space, someone that does more kind of home-based work, someone that has their own independent business. I think the tenants are very, very much the same, but it's interesting, and hopefully we can talk more about that from your perspective, like how are things different because of the different situation you're in? I think that's more diverse than what we typically talk about in local government. So I'd like to talk about that more.
Scott, did you want to open it up to the folks that are on the line to talk about that now, or just kind of think of it through?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to interject that as just a thought to recognize people are coming at this from all different kind of angles. So that's great.
Okay, great. So then when you think through like all of the functions that you do and how do you determine what those major functions are? And we'll talk about some terminology of critical functions and essential functions and the difference between them, all that later on. But after you think through what are those major functions that you do, you need to start looking at, okay, well, how long can we go without carrying those out? And that will help you prioritize what are the functions that you need to focus on first. If you can go less than a day with that function being carried out, or getting that system back up and running, or that process back up and running, that's a pretty high priority function that you have. And you can go, can we wait a day? Can it wait over the weekend? Is it something that can wait a month or a week before we get things back up and running? That all feeds into your prioritization of what are the most important functions that we do that our organization needs to carry on. And it really might depend on the time of year. And we've seen that in planning processes across the country when we help clients with the continuity planning. They say, well, if it's the middle of the spring, then, the major function of developing our budget is not a high priority for us. But, the developing a budget's not a high priority for us for this period of time, but then come the summer when we're about to get into the next fiscal year, it's absolutely like the most important thing that we do. So when you look at your functions and prioritizing them, you kind of have to assume that you're during the period of time when it is the most critical. So when you want to prioritize, a function of developing the budget or whatever function that you come up with, if that's most important and really a focus in the summer, then no matter what time of year it is that you're actually doing this planning, assume in your heads that it's during the summer when it's the most important, so that your plan can be implemented no matter what time of year it is, and you have the appropriate prioritization to allow for those, different things happen during different seasons. And that will help you to prioritize all of the functions that you have and figure out how long you can go without them being performed. And that will give you the set of critical functions, which is the term of art for those most important functions that you carry out that have to get done for your organization to continue to exist. Something else that you need to think through is the roles that need to be played to carry out those major functions. So we talk about leadership and authority in your organization. So you have your typical org chart and who reports to whom and who's in charge of these different things. And so when you want to think about who or how we're going to operate when staff may be unavailable or we're going through this disruptive event, start with who's in charge when the boss is on vacation. And let's not get into, boss versus leader versus manager versus supervisor. Let's keep it simple. When the person over you goes on vacation, do they put another person in charge of everything? So if the boss goes on vacation, do they say that, the assistant manager is in charge and that assistant manager now has the full authority of the manager's position to perform everything that the manager normally does when he or she is available? Does it go to a particular position or to a particular individual? Is it the assistant manager's in charge, or is it that, let's say, Scott or Jennifer's in charge, while I'm away? Likewise, think about who fills the different roles that the manager or the boss usually carries out. Is it all of the authority of that position goes to someone else, or do the different things that the manager does get split up? So, while I'm on vacation, Scott can sign timesheets, Jennifer can approve purchases. Are you sure that there are people that have access to the bank account for your organization? Who handles what happens during an emergency? If our office catches fire, who's going to be in charge of making sure that people get out safely and that the entire staff knows the office is going to be unavailable for a while? Who can hire and fire employees, make those human resources and personnel decisions? Who can write proposals? Who can sign contracts? All of these different things, you need to think about who's able to do those in normal time, and then think about who will be able to do those if something bad happens, and make sure that you have the administrative requirements checked off, that if one person in the organization is the only one who has access to the bank account, what happens when they leave, or if heaven forbid something happens to them and they're not available, they just disappear. Then how do you have access to your organization's finances? With the timesheets, like I said earlier, people that work for your organization, they want to get paid. And if timesheets are a critical component to them actually getting paid, who approves them? And if that person is no longer there or is unavailable, how does that happen? And do you have the redundant processes in place to say, okay, well, if this position, this leader is not available, here's how this process will work, so that you know how each of these functions and each of these aspects of those functions gets carried out after an event that disrupts your normal operations.
This is one too that I've heard from some very small businesses I've talked to, or I'll give the example too of a bit like a farm business too, that I know people that want to make sure that this is clear too, if something were to happen to them or some disruption that they would need further support, that it's documented to help protect the legacy of that business. So I think that, yeah, even if it is a very small business, this is important to do too.
So another component that you want to start, thinking through about your organization, we mentioned that the inaccessibility or the damage to your building might be one of the precipitating events that makes you have to implement your continuity plan. So when you think through the damage to the buildings, do you have a system to determine if any of your people were injured? And do you have a way to let the staff know the building was damaged or is inaccessible? And are those processes for just during business hours? Like, we know during daylight, if we find out that the sewer main broke and now we can't get into our building, how do we tell our staff? But also, what happens if something happens in the middle of the night and you want to let people know, don't bother trying to come to the office tomorrow because the building was damaged or the road crews have shut down every way to get to the office. So we're going to have to not work from the office today. And then what's in the building that we need? And do you have other either copies or redundant sets of these things? If your food truck is in a garage and the garage burned down last night, do you have another food truck? Do you have some other way to perform your functions? If it's a landscaping company, where does your equipment live? And what's in there that you need to find somewhere else now, either through renting it or through whatever agreements you want to put in place with other organizations or rental companies, et cetera. How are we going to get a new excavator or a new food truck, or how do we find that same information? Do we have where else could we find a supply of cash for our financial clients that want access to their money? What else is in the building that we need? And how do we replace the supplies and the equipment that were damaged or destroyed? That could be, well, we have several branch offices and we can kind of borrow bits and pieces from each of them to get the affected branch up and running, or we have agreements with other organizations that do similar work to what we do, or we know there are rental companies where we have a really good relationship with our supplier, that if we have, if our inventory was destroyed or damaged and we need to replace it very quickly, we can put in a rush order. How are you going to replace the supplies, the equipment, the stuff that you need? And those supplies could be major things like heavy equipment and office equipment, down to the smaller things. Do you have an extra notary stamp if you deal with documents that need to be notarized? Do you have an extra supply of the special paper that your paychecks are printed on, or any other kind of the key supplies that you need? Where can you find extra supplies of that to replace what's been damaged, destroyed, or just made inaccessible to you? Like the supplies and equipment, they might be fine, they're sitting in the office, but we can't get into the office for another month. What happens then? when you talk about the damaged and inaccessible buildings, you also want to think about where will our staff work. If you dive into the guidance, you'll see the concepts of hot sites, warm sites, and cold sites. And that's all about, is the new space ready to go? So a hot site would be, we have this other location identified. Our people can just drive there and get up and running right now. We have the extra equipments or the extra like computers, we have chairs, we have desk space, the IT infrastructure is already there, wires are plugged in, we have lights, we have running water. People can just go to this branch instead of this, original branch office to continue to perform the things they need to do. A warm site would be some of the infrastructure is in place, but not all of it. Like maybe you've identified a space to serve as your new office, but it needs some work to be able to be usable. So maybe you have an agreement with a neighboring company or another organization that, yeah, if you can't get to your building to do your work, you can use our conference room. Well, it's great that you have that space set up, and it's got maybe a couple outlets and some IT infrastructure already established, like some data ports that you can plug into, or it has good Wi-Fi. It's you're not starting from nothing, but you definitely don't have everything you need. That would be considered a warm site. Next is a cold site, which is basically you've got 4 walls and a roof, but you need to supply everything else. You need to find tables, chairs, equipment, run the wires yourself. Those are all different things that you might run into when you deal with switching to an alternate location. And if it's not ready to go, think about and plan out, what do we need to do to get it ready? We need to run the IT lines. We need to get some extra outlets installed, or we identified a site, but it doesn't normally have power, so we need to get a generator on site to power the location so that we can operate from there. Likewise, could our staff just work from home? Some organizations, that will be a viable alternative, and we've seen that through the pandemic that worked for some companies and some non-governmental organizations, but not everyone. Some, maybe in your organization, some staff can work from home, but some absolutely cannot. If you're going out and providing service in the community, and it's something that you have to be in the community to fulfill those critical functions of your organization, no, we can't do that from home. I can't do, I can't provide mobile feeding from home. We have to be out there in the community. But at the same time, our office staff, they could work from home, but maybe not everybody. And if they can work from home, what will they need? Are you providing computer equipment, laptops versus desktop computers? Do you need to set up a virtual private network, a VPN, so that your staff can access your normal computer network from home, and really think through, what they'll need to be able to work wherever you decide that they can work.
I think this is actually, these are all really good points, Tony, and part of the discussion too that, I've had with a lot of community members and a range of agencies and businesses over the last couple of years that, there's a very rare, I don't think I've ever talked to anyone that has a really comfortable hot site necessarily, but it's something to really think through, especially as we think through hazards we're likely to face. And, if your residence or your business or your government entity is located like in a floodplain, think through these things, to think through other options. And these disruptions, as we know, do occur. So I think it's a good point, but it can be overwhelming, I think, when you feel like, oh, I don't have this set up yet. Most of us don't, but we need to start thinking through that one.
Then we get to think through what happens if you have a lack of staff. What tasks are the highest priority? What do you want your available staff to work on first? Can we reorganize the work for the staff that is available? Maybe cross-train our staff, get them trained on new roles and what they can do to help perform those functions. Where can we find more staff? Is it, we're a large organization that operates many different branch offices, and we can pull staff from one branch to another. The building might be fine, the equipment's fine, the supplies are fine, the network is fine. We just don't have enough people. Where can we find more people? That could be borrowing from other parts of the organization. It can be rapid hiring, working with a temp agency, working with a recruiter, having agreements maybe with the local higher education to say, can you provide some students or some grad students that can help kind of fill these roles, and what would that mean and how you would make those processes work. But think through, where can we find more people that can do what we need them to do for our organization to continue? And then what happens if it's just a loss of our data or access to our electronic systems? What can we recreate versus what would be lost forever? If you've got scanned records that go back hundreds of years, or I should say, if you have scans of records that go back hundreds of years, and those scanned versions are the only thing that exist anymore, because the original records, the original paper was either it just kind of degraded and you can't read it anymore, or maybe it was destroyed or damaged in a different hazard event. Look at all of the data that you use and say, what can we recreate versus what would be lost forever, and then develop strategies to figure out what you would do if you lost that data. Maybe say, oh, well, if we lost this set of records, they'd be gone forever. So let's make a backup of those right now, and think that through it and get those together. What data backups do you have? Either for paper records, electronic records, if it's electronic records that live on one particular computer in one particular application that is critical to your organization. What happens if that computer, suddenly the hard drive fails, or that computer is destroyed, or the application just stops working? You get a Windows update and now something stopped working and you lost that data. What backups do you have? And that relates to how old can your data be before it's a major problem? If you look at your timesheet records, maybe we get those records in on Friday, and if something happens to all the timesheets on Friday, can you go back to your staff and kind of like recreate? Well, tell me again, what hours you worked on these different days, and kind of recreate the timesheet. And maybe you usually process timesheets on Friday, but you can't get you can't recreate it until Wednesday the next week. Okay, is that okay for the data to be a few days old? When you look at financial records, maybe that's not so much the case. That data's got to be current as of this very moment, or 2 minutes ago, before it's a major problem. You have to look at how old can the data be before it's a major problem. If it's something that can be a year or 5 years old before it's a major problem, then it's not as hard to maintain backups on a regular basis. But if it's something that you need this to be absolutely current, then you need to think about redundant systems to put in place. Maybe it's things are starting to move to the cloud, and now you've got cloud backup of all of your records. Or maybe you make it part of your process that if it just has to be current as of yesterday, then at the end of each day, make a back, save it to an external hard drive or a USB drive, or print something out and put it in the file cabinet or in a safe or something. How old can it be before it's a major problem to your organization and ensure that you have backups of that data, of that information that's at least that current, so that
Elevator.
happens to your primary data, you can use the backup and still be up and running.
Looks like it's everyone.
Look at what systems you depend on, and are they installed on our computers? Is it web-based? Is it in the cloud? Are there alternate systems that we could use? Maybe you say that Microsoft Office is a critical system for us because we use Word, we use spreadsheets in Excel, etc. Well, if you don't have that, then yeah, we could use Google Docs for a backup. Or if you have a custom-made computer system, that if that failed, what can you do? How do you access the records from that? Do you have secondary systems that you can use? If you typically do something electronically, could you switch to a hard copy backup? What alternate systems could you use? I haven't seen many in recent years, but for many of us, we remember the old credit card swipe machines, things about this big. You put your credit card in, run it over some carbon paper. Now you have your credit card receipt. Could you switch to that for a short period of time to help continue to process payments through credit cards if you had to? What other alternates do you have? And then no matter what the scenario was, be it the building was damaged or inaccessible, the lack of staff, the lack of data or access to our systems, there are certain things that you'll need to think through. How do we provide information to our staff? How do we let our staff know the building's damaged or the water main broke, so don't bother coming to the office, just work from home? Or there was this emergency that happened, so we don't know what's going on, but we'll let you know. What methods of contact do you have? How current is your contact information for all of your employees? And where does that information live? If you have 4 different phone numbers and 2 email addresses for every one of your employees, but it's all on the computer at the office, or it's all printed out in the personnel files, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you can't get there to get that information. So think about making sure that you have good contact information for all your staff, and you have it in places that you can access it, even if your normal systems are down or your normal office location is not available to you. And think about, how often are we going to get in touch with our staff? If this is an ongoing event that takes a week or 2 weeks or a month for us to get back up to normal, how often are we going to talk to our staff about that? Are we going to have every 2 hours, we'll update everyone, every day, every 2 days, every week? How often will you talk to your staff? And has your staff made plans to protect their families? Have they gone through individual or family preparedness? Making sure that, if there's a widespread event, like if some severe thunderstorms come through with some tornadoes, and that's what damaged your building, and you want to get your business back up and running, your staff, of course, are going to focus on, is my family safe first? So encourage your staff to make their own individual or family emergency plans so that they'd be that they're safe, they know what to do, so their family is safe, and are able to go to a friend or family member's house to stay there, or maybe they're staying in a hotel. But your staff won't be able to focus on the work for your organization and what the business or the organization needs if they're completely understandably worried about their family first and foremost. So do your staff have plans in place to care for their families so that they can help kind of return to normal, and help in their recovery? And it's not callous to want your people to go through that planning so that they can come back to work. One of the key components of resilience in the county, in your city, your town, your village, or your community, and for your business is to make sure that people have the financial resources to recover from the event. So your staff might really appreciate that they can get back to work and earn money that their family is going to need to recover from that event. It's not callous to think that you need to get back to work. I don't care that your house just burned down. You need to be back to work. That's not what we're saying. It's, have you made sure that your family would be safe so that you can take the steps that help your family and this organization recover from an event?
Yeah, we certainly have good examples of that in the last couple of years of, taking care of your family is a key component of this and what you come back to contribute to your organization. So, I mean, like there are thinking beyond that. There are great preparedness resources like ready.gov. I'll put that in the chat for a FEMA resource that helps kind of give some of that insights for hazard events for people. But I think that shows good practice for your organization, that you care about the employees and help to make space for them to kind of organize that thought.
Next, you'll want to think through what do we tell our customers? You can even like pre-script messages. So if your organization has offices where your customers come to you, like a bank or like a retail store, what are you going to tell them? Are you going to put out a press release? How are you going to tell them? Are you going to put out a press release? Are you going to say, you're just going to put like a paper on the door that says our water main broke. We're working to make repairs and get our store back up and running. Please, come back in, on Thursday. We think we'll be done, so we'll be able to help meet your needs. Are you going to tell them that we're going to be down for a while? In the meantime, visit our other location at X, on Main Street? Or are you going to say, we're going to be down for a while. To meet your needs, we recommend that you go to this other company, assuming that you have an agreement with them that, they're not trying to long-term steal your customers away. But if you can help meet your customers' needs, even if you can't do it, they'll keep that loyalty to you, or they'll be more likely to keep that loyalty to you than if you just said, nope, we're closed, and just left them on their own. Likewise, what are you telling your suppliers? Do you have a normal delivery made? And if so, if your organization is impacted, are you telling your supplier, let's skip this week's shipment, or we lost all of our inventory, so can we bump up the shipments? Can we get some more supplies? Should they be going somewhere else? If you're operating from an alternate location, you need to let your suppliers know, our building got damaged and we're now, working from this other location. So please make your deliveries to us at this other location, and think through what communications you normally have with suppliers and what you would tell them in all of these different scenarios so that they continue to provide you the supplies that you need. And then how do we get back to normal or adapt to a new normal? Are we saying, if it was that our building was damaged, think through the repairs, the general contracting that you have to go through, working with the insurance company to replace everything that you need to, where you're going to order it, how long you expect to be down, and how do we get things back to normal? Or what's our new normal going to be? Our office building burned down, so we've been, we found some available office space in this other building. When that original building gets rebuilt or repaired, are we going to go back there, or are we going to stay here because we like this office space better, and have agreements in place to use this space now instead? If you're letting your staff work from home while your building is unavailable, when the building comes available again, can they still work from home, or do you expect them to come back to the office? Those are all things that you'll need to think through. And thinking it through is great, but you'll want to make sure that you write it down, develop a continuity plan. This thinking it through, this was the planning process, but you'll want to memorialize all of these decisions, all of this, conversations you've had in a plan document, so that you can train new staff on it, make sure that you're kind of refreshing yourself on what to do if there isn't an emergency, and go through it at least every year. And so we're providing a business continuity plan template, and we call it a business continuity plan. It's, if any non-governmental, but nonprofit organizations are on the line here today too, feel free to use it. Just take the, call it whatever you want. We're going to walk through the plan template in a few minutes, towards the second half of our time together. You can find other templates through a variety of resources. We'll talk about some additional resources in a moment. Or you can develop a plan yourself from scratch. What the plan looks like doesn't matter as much as the amount of thought that you put into developing the plan. And so when we talk about these additional resources and some additional information that you'll find useful, I mentioned that the continuity field is very, very technical and has different terms that they use. So when you look at what we talked about today, if you get into reviewing guidance and reviewing other templates that are available, there's more formal terminology. So, what major functions do you need to carry out to continue to exist? For the non-governmental sector, that's called the critical functions. In the government sector, they're called the essential functions. It's not really clear why they chose two different words there for government versus non-government, but it is what it is. So you'll see critical functions or critical business functions sometimes even when you dive into the guidance and other templates. How long can it wait before we're starting to get this function back up and running is formally called the recovery time objective. It's how quickly you need to get this back up and running. Some of your critical functions can wait only 12 hours. Some of them can only wait a day. Some of them can only wait a week. And as you kind of determine how long they can wait, think about, if you're closed on the weekend, your critical functions, they can wait at least 2 days. I mean, if you're not working on it over the weekend, it can wait 2 days. And think about what's your objective for the time that you're allotting before you start recovering that that critical function. Who's in charge when the boss is gone is succession. Identifying successors, developing a line of succession that the district manager, if that person's not available, then the branch manager takes over, and if the branch manager is not available, the office manager is going to take over. And if the office manager is not available, the assistant manager takes over. Plan out the successors. Conversely, when you're looking at who fills the roles when the boss is gone, like when you're not just shifting everything to one person or to one position, but you're breaking it up. We talked about who can sign timesheets, who can hire and fire employees, things like that. Those are delegations of authority. Who will be receiving the authority to carry out those functions? When we look at what's in the building that we need, those are your vital supplies and equipment. If we look at where will our staff work if our primary location is not available, those are your alternate facilities. How old can the data be before it's a major problem for us? That's your recovery point objective, as opposed to the recovery time objective. What systems do we depend on are called your vital systems. How do we get back to normal, or a new normal is called reconstitution. Something else that's in here is there's also the concept of devolution, which means that we're not going to try to get things back up and running. We're going to shift it to someone else to carry it out for us. So for instance, if you are an organization with multiple branch offices, like a financial institution, maybe you're not trying to, well, if your branch on Main Street is damaged, or you can't get to it, maybe you're just saying, our Main Street branch is closed for now. Please visit our 4th Street branch to meet your needs. That's devolving the operations from the Main Street branch to your 4th Street branch. To keep this seminar at kind of a lower level and simplify, we simplified a lot of the topics. So I just wanted to go through these different, the formal terminology, so you'll be able to relate what you see in the future to the questions that we looked at. And even that thinking it through, that's known as a business impact analysis. You'll see that term as you get into continuity planning as well. So just to make sure that you've got an awareness of the formal terms that you'll see as you develop a plan, as you look at additional resources. But we wanted to take the time today to show you kind of the thought behind each of those terms to make it more useful for you and more understandable.
Yeah, I don't know about all of you too, but I sometimes when I first was learning more about this through Tony and others too, I mean, it's a little overwhelming. And I think, a lot of the terminology is a little overwhelming as well. I mean, I think a lot of it has roots in military and like very detailed recovery techniques. So I think that's very, it's a lot to get your head around. So Tony's going to talk a little bit more about programs and resources here to help bring this together. But maybe we just pause real quick, because I realize there's a lot that kind of we hit with here, and with all the other things we're doing, it's hard to make time for this thing, this issue that may or may not be relevant for us, right? But I wanted to see if before we got into the programs and resources, do people have any thoughts or concerns or anything they want to bring up before we get into those examples? All right, we'll keep it going there, Tony, and we'll field the questions at the end there.
Okay. So this was looking at developing a plan, going through the planning process. And when you look at your overall continuity program, there's a lot that goes into it, and it all relates to those critical functions. Continuity planning is all about carrying out your critical functions. So you've got your key personnel, the people that can make the decisions, the people that are, in charge of the different functions, your continuity facilities and alternate work sites, those, hot, warm, and cold sites, the other places you can go to carry out your functions. Continuity of communications, if you typically work, communicate via email, can you switch to phone, or vice versa? Worst comes to worst, could you use a courier service to provide documents from one place to another? Your vital records management, it's not just identifying, what are the vital records, but you're looking at where do they live? How do we access them? Where are they backed up? How often are they backed up? Have we tried, turning off the records, or thinking through, telling our staff, all right, we're going to test to see if we can access those backups and how long it'll take to restore our information from the backups. The human capital management, a really fancy way of saying take care of your people. From that, the perspective of, the family emergency planning, to how do we find new staff, test the plan, make sure your staff are trained on the plan and what they should do during an emergency, and conduct exercises. And those exercises, there's a wide range of what you can do. You can say, we're going to test, how quickly can we set up an IT infrastructure at our other site? How long will it take for our IT people to get us up and running at another site? Test that one aspect of your plan. You can also have a a tabletop exercise where you come up with a scenario and say, okay, this bad thing happened. What are you going to do? And you could go all the way through a full-scale exercise, which is you get everyone together and you say, all right, this building has just been damaged. Go actually set up operations at your other facility, or kind of get people actually moving and implementing the plan to make sure that the plan works. Devolution, we talked about that with, maybe you just say, instead of us being able to meet your needs, go here to get that done. For reconstitution, that's getting things back up and running, getting yourself back to normal or a new normal. And then your continuity resources, what other stuff, what other information and guidance and things do you need that could help you carry out those critical functions?
Hey, Tony, we got a question from Allie from FoodNet here about, just thinking through the number of things that we're talking about here. And she asked, is there like, really one good place to start, because there's so many concepts, and, where should folks take the first step? Any suggestions on that, Tony?
There's not one good place to start, but here on the slide, you have a few places you might start. So FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, they have a full toolkit for continuity resources, though that's mostly geared toward government. You would still be able to find some good information for the non-governmental sector as well. Scott put ready.gov in the chat. That's a very good place to go to. It's got a variety of toolkits and templates and links to training that you might take. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation has a Resilience in a Box set of tools, checklists organized into like the basic, intermediate, and advanced levels in terms of how far along you are in kind of developing your continuity program. The New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, or DISHES, has a business preparedness page that offers some guidance to think about. A lot of them we covered here today. And there's also, private organizations that provides tools and resources, like the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They have an Open for Business EZ toolkit that you might find to be useful for you.
And the other thing I'll just say, Allie, too, is for me, some of these work better than others in terms of my experience in work. And so some of them, might work better for you. So just digging into it and seeing, hey, is this for my type of business? A lot of just cue questions for you, almost like a worksheet that you can look through, like just to flag with you and your colleagues to say, hey, what are these things we should be thinking about? And that can translate into a plan. So I think that thinking through what you have and also looking at what disruptions that you might be, used to, what has caused problems in the past and what have you learned from that? So I think that's a helpful piece too. But yeah, some work better than others, and based on what you do too, right? So I'd encourage you to, as Tony's saying, take a look at some of these resources, and also the resource that we'll send you post here about the continuity plan to give you some thoughts on that. Got another good question here from Vanessa too. I wanted to throw out, Tony. It's a good one. Is there a universal understanding of how much a company, depending on the size, the industry, et cetera, should spend on this type of overhead? She said she works for a small contractor, and all this work, while it's important, it's not billable. So just is there kind of a sense of that, or is there a case to be made that there's a good investment of time in doing this, or is there a sense of scale of that, Tony?
There's not really a standard of how much you should spend on this kind of planning, but you can find statistics out there, and I'll repeat this statistic, even though I've never been able to find the objective source of it, but it's pretty prevalent in the field of emergency management that I think 80% of businesses that close for 2 weeks never reopen. And so maybe there's not an objective measure to say we should spend this much money on it, but there is definitely the return on the investment of time that you put into this. And the amount of time it takes will vary depending on your organization. If you're a large, multi-county regional organization, or you're in an industry that has a lot of regulatory requirements to meet and boxes you need to check, no matter where you're operating from, it's going to be more time and more complex. A small contractor, if you have, one small office space with a few staff, and you use mostly, Office Online or Office 365, and mostly, commercially available systems or free systems, everything's web-based, then it's not going to take you as much time to think through these questions. You might say, well, there's 5 of us here. If one of our staff is sick for a few weeks or wins the lottery and quits tomorrow, all of a sudden, we have normal procedures in place for finding new staff. If it's that, we use a certain key piece of equipment, it's all right, well, where would we get a new one if this one broke? I mean, you've probably already thought it through at different times and just never put it in the kind of the context of continuity planning. But it could be as detailed or as simple as you make it, and that can vary. For smaller organizations, probably spend less time on this. Larger,
that's a huge point,
organizations
Tony.
are going to take more time.
I think it's a great point because, I think when we think about these things, they're these, very detailed, multi-page, tens of pages of documents that you pull out when the disaster happens, that type of thing. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. And realistically, we're not all going to develop plans like that. Even in local government, I don't think we will necessarily. But I encourage you to look at some of these resources, including the template we sent. But the last link on here too, the Institute for Business and Home Safety. I think that's an easy, digestible thing to look at, to cue some things, and it might even be just a couple of pages of things that you think, based on your situation, you need to address. The only other thing, I think these are really great questions from both Vanessa and Allie on that. But the other point we often hear, and this is just a general reference in kind of hazard mitigation, so the investments and stuff before hazards occur. One of the reasons why FEMA puts so much money in those efforts is because they think that, for every dollar you invest, and again, I couldn't cite the study on this, they often talk about this, but the dollar you invest before the hazard event, saves something like $4 in the back end of things. I mean, obviously there's some things you can do, and it's hard to make that time. I totally get that. Believe me, I get that. But I think thinking through some key pieces really could save some longer term hardship. And so hopefully some of these things will help cue that, but good questions.
Okay, well, another part of what the county asked us to do was put together a simple sample business continuity planning framework. So I'm gonna kind of bring that up on the screen and walk through it with everyone. Just give me one moment.
This is a resource that we will send to all of you, and we'll make sure it's posted on our website as well for your future reference and for others.
Scott, is it showing okay?
It is. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Like I said, we wanted to keep it simple. There's not a lot of flashy graphics. Feel free to format it however you want. It is built as a template. I mentioned it. It's labeled a business continuity plan. If you don't consider yourself a business, that's fine. You can just turn it into a continuity plan. But it's a template that aligns with what we've talked about today. You can see that it's in Microsoft Word. It's easy to use. Anything that you would need to customize is highlighted, though, of course, if you use the template, you'd be free to customize anything, even if it's not highlighted. But we use the highlight to kind of take your attention to what you should look at. It gives you a table of contents. I'm going to scroll through some handling instructions, which is here's how it should be stored, handled, transmitted in accordance with whatever security directives you want to put in place. There's no like formal federal or state or county requirements for how you handle these plans. It's all, you can update this to say whatever you want. Like if it's only the manager is gonna see it, okay, fine, but make sure that your staff gets trained on what's in it. If it's going to be put on the network that's available to everyone in the organization, say that too. And have a point of contact for any questions regarding the plan. So likewise with the security directive of who can access it, and that you wouldn't want to release it for public information or for the public. There's a table for your plan revisions. Like I said, you should maintain it at least every year. You should also review it anytime there's an event that disrupts your operations to see, well, we said in the plan we were going to do this, but when the roof started leaking and we had to leave, we realized that didn't really work for us. So you updated the plan, and so just log the updates that you make. Who gets copies of the plan should be recorded if you're distributing hard copies. A simple purpose statement, like I said, the highlighted organization, just customize it to your organization, but go through all of the text that's not highlighted just to make sure that it still works for you. When we talk about the critical functions or the critical business functions, the ones that are critical, it should be the ones that need to get up and running again within 12 hours and performed for the 30 days at least. And so here are some examples of circumstances that might require activation of the plan. A threat to the facilities or operations, a facility-based emergency like a fire, a power outage, water line break, large-scale, widespread emergency, inability of staff to perform the functions, and then you can add any other circumstances here if you've got them, or just delete the highlighted text. If you think these 4 bullets work for you, you can delete the rest and not add anything. The situations section is basically the where in the plan you say, okay, here's the deal. This is our situation. We've got requirements that should be incorporated into all of our programs. We're vulnerable to these different hazards according to the Tompkins County Hazard Mitigation Plan. You can look through that plan and work with Scott to find out exactly which hazard areas your facilities are in and list them there. So you start thinking, okay, we're vulnerable to flooding because we're right along the creek. And so if a flood happens, it's going to damage the building, or maybe we'll just see flooding that just cuts off access to the building. And that's part of what you would think about as well. What hazards could impact your facility and what would those impacts be? There's a set of planning assumptions. A lot of these are kind of generic from the guidance, but you can feel free to add any others. We say that, the county or the local government may have proclaimed a state of emergency, and that will have an impact. It might be that internet service and network access might not be available for some period of time at an alternate facility. Some assumptions that you can make for why we would have to implement the plan. Some records and systems might not be available. You also have to keep in mind that your vendors, suppliers, customers, government agencies that you normally work with, they might be experiencing a disruption in their operations as well from that same event. And then we get into the concept of operations, or the ConOps. This starts with the program management. So who's in charge of your organization's overall continuity program? If you're in a small company, it might be the owner. or the office manager, or the business manager. Who's ultimately in charge of making sure that the plan is developed and maintained, etc. I see Scott's been adding things to the chat here. And then it talks about your critical business functions, or those critical functions that we talked about, and just list them and give a priority of, you can say it's a 1 to 4, you can say high, medium, low, however you want to prioritize them. This is where you list out what are those critical business functions. And then I mentioned that business impact analysis, that thinking it through that we did, is called a BIA. So what you'll do, and we organized this into a table that worked for some of our other clients in New York State, where we've got the first critical function, replace the highlighted text with the name of the function. And these here are highlighted in red, whereas everything else is highlighted in yellow, because yellow on blue did not show up very well at all. You would not have been able to read what was in the text with yellow highlight. So we used red. There's no other reason for red versus yellow than that. Describe the business function, identify the equipment, the files, the records you need, considering, is it going to be done virtually? Does it require on-site computers? What software do you need? Do you need to have an internet connection or email access, etc.? Identify the people that are involved by title. Can it be performed by mid-level or lower level staff? Or does it require the leaders, decision makers, policy makers? And do they have the formal authority required to conduct or to complete that function? So when we talked about delegations of authority, who can sign timesheets, who can hire employees, that's all part of your what is probably a critical business function of maintaining your human resources and personnel management. Describe the facility requirements. Do you need office space, storage space, a garage? What are the other kind of requirements of the space where this is carried out? What supplies and resources are needed? What are the different dependencies and interdependencies? If this function stops for a number of hours, what's the impact to the overall organization? What other organizations do you rely on? What happens if they're not available? What organizations rely on you to carry this out? And which ones are highest priority? And what contracts or supplies are needed to be able to carry out that function? What documents and records are needed? And if they're needed, is it a particular location? Is it online? How are they accessed? What do you need to be able to access those records? And then any other particular information or unique characteristics of that function that's not covered elsewhere in the table. As you get into other templates and resources, this table format is kind of unique. You'll probably see more that there are sections of the plan that lay out each of those instead of looking at it in a table. We think this is a simpler way to do it, to help you with that business impact analysis and going through the process of thinking through all the things that we talked about. And then for each of your critical business functions, just copy and paste that table and fill it out. We look at your deadlines and critical events. What different deadlines do you have in carrying out those critical functions? So if you have a report that's due to a regulatory agency every April, or if you know that on a quarterly basis you need to make your business income tax payments, et cetera. What are all of those critical events that go into each of those functions, and who's in charge of them when they're due, and then who do you report to? Like who set the deadline. Your resource requirements and logistical support. What vendors do you currently have on contract? How do you make emergency procurement decisions? List out how you would get stuff and, kind of maintain those logistics, be it, supplies, equipment, infrastructure, IT, especially in that section. Your alternate facilities, we talked about those hot, warm, and cold sites. If you identified them, list them in the table and indicate if it's a hot, warm, or cold site, or if you're looking at telework instead. For your succession planning, identify your key personnel, like the leadership in your organization, and identify the next 3 positions that would serve as the successor. So again, this is the if I'm on vacation, Joe's in charge or Mary's in charge. And so you should look at it from a job title instead of individual level. So if it's the office manager is unavailable, then the assistant manager takes over, or the highest ranking supervisor, whoever's been there the longest. How do you say who's going to fill those roles down to the next 3 people, the next 3 positions, and then do that for each of your key staff positions that you define. And then likewise with your delegations of authority and triggers. So if it's the head of human resources can sign the timesheets, then maybe the assistant director is next, or the office manager could do it in a pinch. Who are those people that can take over that particular aspect, that authority. And when you look at delegating authority, you should say, how long should you wait before the next person can take over? So if you're looking at signing timesheets, so yeah, well, if the head of HR just takes a long lunch, you don't need to delegate the authority for a couple hours. But if it's, we haven't heard from the HR director for 4 days, okay, now, we've reached the point that timesheets need to get signed. So now that authority can get delegated down to the assistant manager. Or what rules are there? Are there any limitations on the delegations? Like something that a manager does, maybe the assistant manager can do it for the next 3 days, but after 3 days, it needs, a higher level of approval for who can do it. Your devolution planning, we talked about, that's when you're saying, these functions need to get done, but we realized if our facility is not available, oh, excuse me.
Bless you.
If we're not available, then we're going to ask this other organization to take over for us. Maybe that's part of your plan. Some information that we're going to encourage our personnel to develop their own plans for themselves and their families. Have a set of go kits or drive away kits. These are caches of supplies and equipment that if you had to evacuate your building all of a sudden, you would just be able to grab this and you'd have everything you need to be able to operate for the next couple of days while you purchase more supplies.
And here's one that we have great examples from, pandemic planning and things we learned of making sure we have the power cords for your laptops or your range of other things that came up then that, allowed some required some scrambling. So, thinking through that recent example to help kind of parlay that to other examples, I think is pretty helpful.
And so we've got some example contents of what your go kit or your drive away kit might contain. So again, I mentioned that, contact information for your employees. It's great if it's on the office computer, but if you don't have that computer with you, how are you going to have that information? So have the phone numbers, email addresses, etc., ready to go, and then maintain that kit and describe how often it's going to be maintained and who's going to maintain it. You should, look at it at least every 3 months, every 6 months, to make sure that if you have supplies that expire or have become obsolete, that they get replaced on a regular basis. For the training exercise plan, here's some sample recommendations for what to do at what frequency, but you can go through and change that as you see fit, as you develop your plan. Here's what you can do every quarter, every year, the training sessions that, training topics that should be covered. And again, this is all scalable to your organization. You don't need to have 8 different training sessions for your organization. You might say, at your, let's say you have a staff briefing every day before you get out into the field and do your work. You might say during that, oh, and as a reminder, if something would happen to this building, you would report to this other building and go from there. It can be that simple. That can be the training, if that's appropriate for your organization. Likewise, this individual and family emergency preparedness. That can be a quick, we want to make sure that you and your family are safe after an emergency. Here are some resources that you can go to, like at ready.gov, to create a plan for yourself or for your family for an emergency.
I think that's a great, really good point, Tony. Like, yeah, it's very scalable. Like, it doesn't need to be a full day training necessarily, or it's thinking through these things and changing it for how you need it fits for you. One thing that I recognized in this page too that I really liked was the training particularly for onboarding for new people, or thinking through beyond your current leadership to like, this is good legacy stuff too, like making sure people, I think it's a way to kind of really weave together your organization or your business to think through kind of next steps for new people. Because I think coming in with getting a sense of how you're going to work together when something kind of a pressure situation like this occurs, I think is really respectful and helpful. So I really like that point there, Tony, to say, for existing and new employees too, to know, hey, this is what we're talking about, is really helpful. Other benefit of these documents.
And likewise, along with the training, the exercises, they can be as simple as you want to make them, or as robust and complex as you want to make them. And you can split up. You don't have to make this a full like all day exercise. You can break it up into different things. You can make it discussion based versus actually having people move things around and make it more of a practical exercise. We get into the response phase, how the plan is activated, who can say, yes, we're going to activate the plan. How are those decisions going to be made? And this is all for your discussion and make sure that it works for you. Things to think about and answer for events with warning and without warning, and during business hours and after regular business hours, so that you can have this information ready to go to guide you when something very bad is happening and it's stressful and maybe you're half asleep, but have this resource to refer to for how to make these decisions for your organization. How do you determine what the initial impact of whatever happened was on your facilities, on your people, on your data and your systems? Who do you notify? How are you going to tell your staff, customers, regulators, other organizations? How are you going to check on the status of your staff? And then how often are you going to provide them information and keep them, accountable for how things are going? How are you going? What other organizations are you going to notify, and how are you going to do that? And then how are you going to maintain ongoing communications with internal, staff and internal customers, and then external suppliers, customers, government agencies. What's your routine for communications going to be? You know, is it going to be a daily email blast, a daily text message, updating the company Facebook page every day or every 2 days, every week, et cetera? You know, what are you going to do to make sure the people that interface with your organization have information about what's going on and what they need from you? Should organize your company there as like for an emergency response organization. This can be a for a small organization, this might just be your typical org chart. If you're a large organization where some people are critical towards, you know, and some people are vital in carrying out your critical functions and some are not, you can simplify the org chart and say, you know, this unit, these subunits, you know, what's the organization that needs to be there to carry out your critical business functions. When you activate the plan, there might be different activation levels, or you might say, you know what, I don't need to, my organization doesn't need to worry about different levels of activation. We're either activating the plan or we're not. You know, we are not large enough or complex enough that we need to, you know, specify a level 1 versus a level 2. It's completely up to you how you customize this and make it usable for your organization. But this lays out, if you do want to look at different levels of activation, here are some things to consider and what might be included in each of those different levels. We break down some basic tasks for implementing the business continuity plan. You know, first and foremost, recognize the need to activate the plan, coordinate that decision, and then activate the plans. Notify employees, internal and external stakeholders, assess the status of devolved functions. So if you are saying someone else needs to do this for us for now, you know, maintain kind of a constant status of that and when you can pick it back up yourselves. And then, you know, different tasks to complete to help implement your plan. And then the recovery and demobilization section, you know, how do you get back to normal or the new normal is described here. We break out a reconstitution manager that may or may not be part of your organization. You might not break that out as a separate role. You might just say that our manager is going to be, you know, in charge of everything from activating the plan to leading the organization while it's being activated, and will also fill the role of the reconstitution manager, you know, figuring out how to get things back to normal or a new normal. So we lay out some information about the role of the reconstitution manager and the continuity management team, which was defined earlier in the plan template that we didn't really talk about it. And the different levels of recovery. Again, if you don't think it's necessary to get into that much detail in your plan, that's totally up to you. What recovery for, you know, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking about from the moment you activate the plan, you should be thinking about recovering from the event. So from you know, zero time after the, you know, so for the first few days after the event happened, you know, you're already thinking about how are we going to return to normal operations. And then as, you know, time goes on, you know, for recovery for 1 to 3 weeks, here are some things to do on a level 1, you know, as you're able to. But these different levels are spelled out in this graphic. If you find it useful, if not, you can delete it or replace it with something that your organization finds more useful for thinking through getting back to normal. There's a section on personnel management and making sure you have the staff that you need to carry out the work, how to document or how to maintain your documentation when you're demobilizing or when you are done implementing your continuity plan and getting back to normal. any, vendor agreements, order forms that you fill, purchase orders, insurance information, things like that, all gets compiled into your records of the activation of the plan. A quick section for how the plan is going to be maintained and distributed. Should review the plan at least annually. You might decide it needs to be more often than that. And then how is the plan getting updated? If you have hard copies, are you switching out pages that get updated, or are you just going to reprint the whole plan? It's only 30 pages long or so. Decide we'll just swap out the entire copy every time. And then, as Scott mentioned, the template was developed with funding from the Department of State. So we recognize that at the end of it as well. So that is our template that will be sent out to you. Let me get back to.
Yeah, just while Tony's transitioning too, I really like that point that Tony made too, that no one's approving this except you, so this can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, there might be sections that you don't want to deal with, or you don't think are helpful for your operation. So you just, you structure this how you see fit. It's mainly thought of as cues for you to structure what you need. I mean, the other one I referenced again, which I think is a helpful kind of tool, is this Open for Business toolkit that is through the Institute for Business and Home Safety. I just put in the link, but it's in the presentation as well. So we'll send you those pieces as follow-up as well, and it'll be posted on our county web page as well. So sorry, Tony, back to you, sir.
Just going to open it up for any other points of discussion or questions that you have in the 15-20 minutes that we have left together here.
Yeah, so I think for those questions, feel free to throw them in the chat if you'd like, or just unmute yourself and ask, or raise your hand if you'd rather be called on. That's fine too. But yeah, just open it up for questions or comments, or maybe even situational. Bring up your, the type of situation you're in for thinking through this, or something you've been through that this has been feeling like something you wish you had or glad you had, that type of thing. Anything, any open thoughts, we welcome them. Maybe I'll throw out a question here. Jennifer looks like she might want to say something here. I don't know.
I was just going to say you did such a great job covering everything that no one has any more questions.
Well, it is overwhelming. And again, I think it's a hard, with already busy day-to-days for all of us. That's something that really came clear to me as I talked to people over the past 6 months to a year in the local business community about this topic. Was it's really hard to make time for this, and so like having key leave behinds resources to digest as time allows is really important. So I get the fact that it's an overwhelming topic too, albeit an important one that we all should make time for, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think, as I said in the beginning, I think, we all know that things can happen, but we've definitely gone through a period where things did happen. And I think depending on how much time people were able to take planning and preparing in advance, or, to the extent that some of us maybe saw the signs that things could get bad really early on and took that extra time to plan for it, I think the first few weeks, or even the first couple of months of navigating, the pandemic, for example, probably were very different experiences depending on how much advanced planning or how well people had put some continuity plans in place. And so just can't really overemphasize the importance of all this. And everyone's just been so, foot on the gas, still trying to push through and push ahead and recover. It's really hard to take that pause and look at those plans again and figure out, well, what comes next, or how do we make sure that we're in good shape for the next potential emergency or disruption. But the information you've shared today is so important. And obviously, whatever the chamber and the county and Tetra Tech can do to support folks, being sure that they're prepared for whatever comes next, so that they can navigate it easily. That's why we're all here. So.
I like that point, Jennifer, too. And yeah, we're all in this together, right? I mean, so that's like, yeah, things that we can do to help support people, no matter where you're coming at this. We want to do that, so let's keep talking about that as questions come up. Please reach out. And then I also did another question came up too about presentation materials. We'll make sure those get to you as well for reference, for again, also for people that I know wanted to come but couldn't because of different conflicts. Had a comment or a question here from Karen too about cooperative extension, Tompkins, having an emergency management plan, helpful reminder of the importance of the training staff, of the content of the plan, and that the County Department of Emergency Response was helpful on providing a list of items for a disaster kit. So that's a good point too. And one of the other things, oh, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say, for organizations that have emergency plans already, there's some overlap, but their emergency plans often assume that you have all the resources you need to carry out your operations. In contrast, the business continuity plans, and for governments, the continuity of operations plans, they deal with what happens when you don't have the resources you normally need. So it's great to have an emergency plan, but make sure that you're also looking at it from the continuity perspective of what happens to your operations if you don't have the normal locations, data, staff, systems, etc.
That's a great point. Great point.
One more thing I want to just bring up too, as we're wrapping here too, I'll put my contact information in the chat as well, but we will follow up on this broader planning effort I referenced at the beginning. Oh, look at that, man. Beautiful. Thank you, Tony. One of the broader connected piece that includes a more fleshed out economic recovery recommendations for what we can be doing. I mean, the core of why we're doing this whole planning effort again is to help that transition. I like that point of kind of someone made in the chat too, of future proofing, future proofing cash flow. We're really looking to help people get back up more smoothly in the recovery phase for disruption, largely connected with our economy. So this broader effort with the different components we've done, we're going to have a broader public meeting for that. We're looking to set that for May 18th in the evening. We'll notice that pretty widely. About 7 p.m. we'll do that. And they'll talk about those different resources we're developing, and we'll take some thoughts that you brought up in this discussion into that as well. So
from the financial side, and I don't know that it will be 100% across the board, but you may all want to check with your insurers and see if developing a continuity plan affects your insurance premiums. So you might actually be able to save money on your insurance premiums with having this plan in place.
Interesting point. Yeah, actually, I'm tying back to thinking through previous positions I've held that we work pretty closely, like with the Institute for Business and Home Safety, and of course they have a motivation that you think through these types of things in advance for impacts to their insurance. So yeah, that's an interesting piece, the role of insurers, and maybe that's a future dialogue we can have together with insurers too about that connection, and if how that translates, and if that has a financial component too. That's interesting. Any other thoughts from anybody that's on the line still? I know a few people have dropped, but I know I've learned a couple of things here that are helping me to move forward. And again, we'll take some of the results from the survey that we distributed as a part of this too, to help influence how these things come together. Certainly welcome you to take that short survey if you haven't yet, to help give us some more guidance. That was in the announcement that was sent with this presentation notice. Anything else come up you want to bring up?
Scott, it's Michelle Henry.
Hey, Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you so very I chair the Climate Adaptation Committee of the Tompkins County EMC, which is the Environmental Management Council. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm really glad to have sat in on this presentation. It gives me a different perspective from our take on how we've been helping you out with things. And I'm really great to see, if I'm going to borrow colloquialism, how you're maintaining a sense of place and reducing the possibility of creating a ghost town.
Yeah, I agree, Michelle. I mean, basically for folks that couldn't completely hear that, of like the importance of how this connects with our sense of place, and making sure that, you know, the physical components of all of our work, that that we maintain a good presence in this great community. And so, yeah, thinking through how to reduce the chance that it's going to be, you know, when we have disruptions, it's going to be something that's going to really knock us back big time. That's, of course, happened considerably through different hazard events. There's history of that for like of businesses and organizations that have, it's really knocked them sideways. So yeah, if we can help to do things small and large that help to reduce that and maintain this great community, we want to do that. So yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Michelle. Any other points?
I just wanted to again thank Scott and Tony. We will be saving the recording, making that available to everyone afterwards, everyone who's registered, but we'll also be sending it out to our general email list, and we can also make the actual presentation, the Word template link, you know, the documents that you've shared available as well. And then of course, direct people to you for further support as needed. And we have a few other member partners who also sort of do work in this area too. So there's lots of resources out there should folks need additional help with their continuity planning. But thanks again for the very important topic and for your time today. Thanks to everybody who attended. And thanks to our partners at Tompkins Community Bank for supporting our L.E.A.R.N webinar series at the Chamber.
Very appreciated from our end too. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
again, Tony.
Thanks,
Feel
Tony.
free to reach out if you have questions.
Appreciate your time, Tony. Thanks.